Welcome to a new episode of SDV Coffee Talk with amazing guests today. Just a small disclaimer from my side. Everything what I say is my own opinion, has nothing to do with my employer.
Our topic is your opinion.
No. Our topic today is ASPICE, demystified. I mean, I read many times in the last months a lot of bashings about ASPICE on LinkedIn, that ASPICE is stopping the European car makers from being innovative and so on. And we thought it would be a good topic for today. Probably we can have a short introduction round. Roxana, you want to start?
Hi, everyone. My name is Roxana. Welcome. I'm really excited to be here. Before I introduce myself, I have a little test for you. So why don't you type in the chat, what do you think ASPICE stands for? Go. So while you guys are typing, my name is Roxana, I already said. I'm an ASPICE consultant and implementer of ASPICE. I've been working with ASPICE for over 12, 13 years now. I'm helping companies to achieve compliance while looking and seeing the value of it. I'm a big fan of ASPICE, and then I'm happy to clarify all the questions you might have today. Anybody answered?
Until now, no.
The audience usually ramps up over time, so
okay.
Let's give it a second.
Martin, you want to continue?
Yeah, I'm Martin Schleicher. I'm currently in Continental, responsible for software strategy, and I'm pretty active around software-defined vehicle stuff. I'm representing Continental, for example, in Eclipse, SDV, Sophie, and a few other initiatives, but that's not the topic today. So we're talking about ASPICE, and in the past, I actually also was responsible for quality management department a couple of times. Involved in the introduction of ASPICE in various product and project developments. Yeah, happy to be here today. And same for Fatih, I'm now talking about my personal own opinion, not necessarily a company opinion.
Okay.
There are already some comments, as you can see. I mean, I will just continue.
Answer, top. Excellent answer, Alfred. For Roxana and Martin, you have to change from private chat to comments, then you can see what they wrote.
Oh, okay.
Florian, you want to just show?
Yes, I'm a regular here, but sure. I've been in the automotive industry for about 20 years. 6 of those at Tesla, 1 at NIO for 5 years now. As an independent consultant about SDV and strategy around SDVs, and happy to have my boss here today to join about this topic. And Fatih, you said in the beginning, yes, we see a lot of this ASPICE bashing on LinkedIn. Actually, it's like pseudo bashing, right? So it's always like a very aggressive comment, which then in the end, after you read the whole thing, it's like, but we are actually all friends and we like to do it anyway, right? So it's not really an act. I have honestly not seen anybody actively blaming ASPICE. They're more using it as a clickbait.
Yeah, probably. I mean, but I have also read a couple of comments or posts which are really claiming this, because they show always this example of China OEMs or Tesla or so, and say, yeah, these brands don't work according to ASPICE, and they're so fast in innovation and coming to the market and so on. And I have sometimes the feeling people are really convinced that ASPICE blocks, and therefore I would like to understand actually what your opinion is on this topic. What if ASPICE is good for software engineering, or it's not, or is it only for hardware related topics, or can this be also applied on software development in automotive? I don't know what your opinions are on that.
I think Roxana had a great statement. What was it you said yesterday?
I think it's not the time to to share it. So, but Fatih, I think it's really important to me that we go back to what it is first, because everybody needs to understand what ASPICE is and what it isn't. So I want to clarify what it is. It is a model or a framework for designing and assessing development processes. That's it. You always have to take it, tailor it, adjust it to your own needs in your organization, in your project, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Martin, go ahead if you want to add.
No, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine. Exactly. And that's sometimes it's just a problem of how it's being tailored and adapted within the organization. So you can apply it for software as well as for hardware if you just need to do it in the right way.
Right. So there are two aspects of ASPICE, and I saw people complaining on both. So one is the model itself, what is written there, and the second one is assessing the model, the third-party assessors that come to assess the project. And I think I want to kind of handle them separately. Right?
Yeah,
so
I want to put on, because Fatih said something like, companies like Tesla or China and so on, they're not working according to ASPICE. That's not particularly true. They don't get assessed on ASPICE, right? But if you look at their processes, and that's I mentioned that before, it's from the inside view, it's not that different. It's just that you don't have an official label on it.
Okay, but how could this? I mean, for example, how can Tesla bring a car on a street without assessed by? I mean, how does it work? I mean, I'm just asking because I don't know.
So yes, this brings the second part of what ASPICE is. So it is a model, right? Why is being so prevalent in automotive is because the OEMs are asking their suppliers to achieve a certain level. To prove that you achieve that certain level, you need to be assessed either by the OEM or by the third-party assessors, right? So Tesla being an OEM, they didn't have this as an internal requirement to be assessed, right? So that's why you don't see that as a public information.
Assess themselves, right?
Or or they wouldn't share that. However, this does not imply that practices or guidance from ASPICE are not being applied throughout. And I think I want to have a challenge here. If somebody has any issues with a specific process or a practice, just bring it up and let's talk about it. I have it in front of me, the model itself, and I can read to you, and then you all tell me what is so outrageous, right? Because we want to clarify this once and for all.
Yeah, and in our experience, what we see is the biggest problems, quote unquote, arise when there are people too stiff and not looking into, as Martin said, tailoring, right? So if you read the model and you just like try word by word to find that one-to-one in your specification, you will sooner or later run into an issue. But it's not that handcuffing of a deal.
Exactly. I mean, you can read those base practices, and if you go through it, all of that is reasonable if you want to build good software. And as Florian said, don't stick to the word. Try to understand what is the reasoning behind if it doesn't fully make sense. So there are different ways to implement it and still achieve the ideas or the principles that were initially behind the concept.
Martin, I think you are quite a while in automotive. I don't know how many years, but I think it's
more than 25
quite a while.
years.
And I mean, have you seen anything, any alternative to ASPICE, for example, or was there any project you worked on which was not following the ASPICE and was better, or did you see any difference? I mean, have you any experience with that?
Some experience. I mean, I've seen projects who are not following ASPICE, but have implemented very rigid processes and created good results. Yeah. So that's perfectly possible, but again, had very clear processes and that have been strictly followed. That's one thing. In theory, there is an alternative to ASPICE. It's the CMMI model. You could even map it to that. So there's no big difference from the process point of view. An important thing to mention is that implicitly ASPICE is a prerequisite for functional safety, which is needed in safety critical applications inside the vehicle.
But functional safety is usually associated with ISO 26262. And what is the connection to ASPICE? I mean, this is a different standard, I think.
ASPICE is
How is the
standard, is the
connection?
model.
It's a model, yeah, but how ASPICE or how functional safety is or needs ASPICE? I mean, what is the
I
connection?
can talk a little bit. I'm actually part of a group, an Intex group of volunteers that are working to harmonize automotive SPICE and functional safety together. ASPICE right now is seen as the basis or good engineering practices that are needed for getting started, and then functional safety comes on top of it. So if you're missing the basis, which would be ASPICE, then your life with functional safety would be way more difficult. So
Okay.
there's a lot of overlapping.
Significant overlap, exactly. Yes.
Yeah, significantly, yes.
Okay. And how does actually China OEMs do that? I mean, if they don't use ASPICE, for example, how do they do that? I mean, do we have any insight in that? Why
They
they are
do.
so fast?
I don't know why people say they don't do that. They do that. Okay.
I don't
so
know.
I want to do this
I read this
exercise.
very often.
Okay, I want to read you the base practices from system requirements from ASPICE, and you guys tell me what engineering organization doesn't do that from get-go without having a name. Okay, I'm reading this out loud. So ASPICE requires to, that's the first BP, specify system requirements. You have to use stakeholders to identify and document functional and non-functional requirements for the system according to characteristics. Nothing crazy here. Then ASPICE BP2 says you need to structure them, right? Prioritize, structure, maybe group them by functionality. I think everybody does that anyway. Then the BP3 says analyze system requirements. You're looking at them, right? You're doing some sort of evaluation. Can I do it? Can I do it now? In what release? Anyone is doing that. Can I test that, right? Anyway, the BP4 says analyze the impact on the system context. Okay, what is around my system? Do I have external interfaces? What else do I need to consider to develop my product? BP5 is, yeah.
I mean, just one comment. Isn't this already some kind of waterfall approach? You do one step,
No,
and the next step,
no,
you have to complete the
it
one, then
doesn't.
the second, then the third.
No,
I mean,
it doesn't say that you have to do one step before the other. It says these are some expected practices that you could do. Analyze,
okay.
define, document.
So
You
what
don't have to do all in one step. You have to.
What
Yeah.
that means is you do that as a good engineer, you do that anyway. And that
Yes.
brings us back to, at Tesla, for example, right? So we did the right way to engineer our product. You can actually look at it through an ASPICE glasses or not. But in the end, it is the right way to engineer your product. If you assess it or not is a different question. And that also is happening. I mean, I was at NEO as well, right? So the processes are the same. If you assess them based on ASPICE framework or not, that's a different thing. But it is the work products are the same just by nature of engineering.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right? So none of these practices are outrageous, are typical engineering practices, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So then it's really the question, Fatih, how to tailor them, how to apply it. And sometimes it's implicitly assumed that you have to follow the V model. Yeah, first do the system requirements and break it down. So you can work according to ASPICE also in an agile setup. Have to think a little bit about it, but it's also documented. There's literature out there how to map ASPICE to agile processes.
Okay, but this tailoring, I think this is one of the big mysteries. Because I think everybody talks about tailoring, but what is the guidance for tailoring? I mean, you can tailor everything away. Actually, you can say, okay, I tailor, and there is nothing anymore.
There's a misconception. Tailoring doesn't necessarily mean to take things out. You can also add things in. That's also tailoring. Tailoring means you're not doing something according to your standard process, whatever that is. Right, for whatever reason, and then you need to document that why is the rationale behind it. So you take specify system requirements and then you think, okay, how does that look for me? Maybe I'm a small agile organization and my requirements are user stories. That's fine. Use your user stories, define them based on whatever the template you have acceptance criteria, that could be the analysis part of the BP, and so on. So don't take it literally. Take the intent of ASPICE and see, okay, how does that apply or fit to me as my organization, as my project? right? That's why it's defined high level and generic enough that you can apply it to different types of projects.
I mean,
And then it's the
there is
question that you document it and follow that practice. Yeah. So if you have start with user stories and then handle it differently, that's not consistent. Yeah?
Okay. I mean, there's a very, very interesting question. I just read one. How to combine ASPICE with open source software? Is there any connection?
Yes, there is. So ASPICE has a unit verification process where it says you need to define what is your strategy or how do you want to verify your unit. And your unit here might be a class, a function, or a file plus a header. So you have to define what that is. And then as part of that unit, if you have open source, then you come up with your own policy. How do you handle it? How do you correct it? How do you report it? You have licensing requirements, you have legal requirements. So while you do not have a one-to-one as part of a way of thinking how you verify your code, you have to consider open source. That's the relationship from ASPICE to open source.
Okay. There is one question. It's what I faced quite often is how does ASPICE differentiate between building software right and building the right software?
So I think we go back to my second part, what ASPICE is not. And I have this quote and I will share it with you. I really like it. So blaming ASPICE for a poor design or a bad user experience is like blaming your cookbook for a bad meal. ASPICE does not help with that. Okay, so people need to understand what it is and what it isn't.
Or in other words, you can have a
engineering.
You can have an L3 ASPICE certified garbage product, but it is developed according to all the specifications. If the specifications are crap and planned UX is crap, then you can still be fully compliant with ASPICE, but it doesn't help you. And that's why I like that the quote, and that's the one I referred to earlier with the cookbook.
Yeah.
If I'm a bad cook, the best cookbook doesn't urgently make me, create good meals.
Right? An excellent, yes. So that's exactly the relationship with ASPICE. So it's the way you specify and design your system and your solution. It's on you. It's not on ASPICE.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay.
And I have an actual.
Nothing in common. Yeah.
I have an actual example where we really specified an user interface. Yeah, was done properly according process. Everything was written down, reviewed, etc. And then only after we finally built the product, we found out that it's just not usable in the way it was we specified with good intention. That can happen.
Okay.
And so the misconception here is to mix up product quality and process quality. Yeah, process quality is aiming to create reproducible or documented results. It doesn't guarantee that the product is actually good at the end, and that should be clear.
Okay. I mean, the ASPICE is not telling you how you build the right product, so to say. It just gives you some recipe how you should build it on the best practices, so to say, on the best way. But okay, I see. Okay, and this is probably this is probably a misunderstanding, and I've heard very often. Okay.
I think Martin had a very good point, and we experience that as users all the time, that something doesn't work well in the real world. The real user experience is not to what we would like to have. It can be with your phone, with your car, whatever it is. And there's an old school approach that it says, like, I specify everything up front and then I implement. And unfortunately, there are a lot of people in the industry that use ASPICE basically as a scapegoat here and say, like, oh, I'm not allowed to iterate because, I have to specify everything up front. And as a matter of fact, and I let Roxana take that because that's her topic, but ASPICE level 4.0 specifically addresses that. So you can take it from here.
Yes. So there is this association of ASPICE with V model. It's absolutely not true. You can use whatever model. You can use hybrid. You can use agile. You can use V waterfall. It doesn't really matter. You can have no name for it. Make your own. It doesn't matter. Okay. So the ASPICE allows for iterative and incremental development. So plan ahead. You have features by build. Do that. ASPICE allows for that. Nobody expects that you have a full set of requirements from the first try, right? Because the industry is moving and the ASPICE and other standards are adjusting as well, right? So Yeah.
I think this hidden assumption that you can specify a product fully upfront. This is not the case anymore. And even thinking about SDV, where we can provide new software features over the vehicle lifetime, by definition, it's not possible to have all the requirements up front. So we need to apply incremental approaches. Yeah.
And you have to learn how your product is actually used in the real world. And this is something where large OEMs currently struggle a lot because their requirements engineering, and we sideswiped this a little bit in the wrong direction here, but their requirements engineering process is usually preloaded 3 to 4 years before the product even goes into proper validation. So I just saw Orkun just had his comment about validation is to build the right product. But you actually have to change and you have to validate in the real world. And you're not only validating in the lab according to requirements, but you actually have to, so because that is verify, right? So you have to validate against what the actual customers do with your product. The reason why this is different than it used to be in the past is because our products are so much more complex and the use cases are so much wider than they used to be. You know, back in the 80s, you had like 3 pedals, you had a stick shifter, and you had a mechanical product. And there was not much you could do with it, right? So other than driving it. But now you actually have a cinema mode in your car, or you have some karaoke machine, or you have your phone talk to your car to change your driver profile. Or in my case, my driver profile drives me into the steering wheel because the car doesn't see me coming in, but it sees her coming in from the other side. This kind of things, the complexity is so much bigger. That's why the whole like learning through the product lifetime is so much more important right now. And if you don't, and you just stick to your 4 to 6 year old requirements, then your customer will at one point will actually go and look somewhere else.
Yeah, I always not like to formulate it in a way we cannot set requirements or say that requirements are given anymore. It's more like a hypothesis, and your development process should be built in a way that you can validate your requirements or hypotheses as quickly as possible.
And in that context, actually, I love my own quote here is that malicious attackers for cybersecurity, they don't really agree to requirement freeze either, right? So you cannot just say like, oh, we're done with requirements, so please don't change your threats anymore because we finished, right? So.
Okay, in this context, actually, I mean, we talked about SDV and rapid software development. In this context, CI/CD is quite popular in the last years, also in automotive. I know this from other sectors, actually, before I worked in automotive, but in automotive, I hear everywhere, CI/CD. But how which aspects of ASPICE can be addressed actually through CI/CD? Is there any, I mean, or is it completely independent, or is there, some match? I mean,
but before we go down that, CI, yes, CD, no, nobody's doing CD in automotive. CD stands for continuous deployment. And we don't continuously deploy software to the end product for the
but
reason
on
of
SDV,
safety.
But in SDV, ideally it should be like that. I mean, you have CI and you directly roll out this, seamless.
We're not there yet. We're not there.
Yeah, I know.
Eventually, maybe, but right now we're talking. What most people talk about is CI/CD, so continuous integration, continuous testing.
And having that automated, they are consistent. Yeah, that you can automate the whole process from requirements into a test and repeat it as often as possible automatically. That's ideal from a SPICE point of view. Yeah, it's documented, it's automated, it's reproducible.
Are there any ASPICE parts? Are there any ASPICE parts, for example, which can be integrated in a CI environment or so that's automatically
yes, absolutely.
given?
Yes.
I mean,
so from integration of software, that's what you're continuously building. That's CI/CD pipeline or CT pipeline, whatever you call it. That can be absolutely integrated. Different checks for different steps for the unit verification. Are you running some sort of mistrust? You want to make sure that the build path? This can all be integrated and automated and solves a lot of the ASPICE best practices. Testing can be part of that, right? So software integration tests, software unit tests. You can go high level, even hill tests can be integrated in your pipeline. So automate as much as possible and focus on actually solving the technical challenges, not the process challenges, right? Developers do not like to think, oh, what exactly do I have to do now, right? So the ASPICE is giving you some ideas, then you make it and integrate it and automate it in a way that you don't have to think about it anymore. This becomes your typical process and can be excellent.
Before we get to that question, real quick, I know a bunch of little of startups and so on working, for example, on continuous traceability checks. So throughout the documentation, but also inside into the code and so on. And so this is actually a perfect example where CI helps you so much to be more compliant or to actually find your issues earlier, because you do this in an automated fashion continuously with every build. And ASPICE as a framework is super happy about that, because your documentation is spot on and you're actually on every build base you are running a check.
Florian, you're referring to docs as a code or engineering as a code?
There's a bunch of companies are using. No, I'm not referring to that. I talked with a couple of guys who work on a AI-based approach, but it sounds like it's going in the same direction. So we will see much better documentation actually from here on forward, because the tools are getting more integrated into the automation.
Yeah. And you can automatically check consistency between requirements, code, and test. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, back in my early steering days, we did one check for traceability. That was the day before the ASPICE assessment, right? And and that's it, right? So and from there on, okay, we're done with it. But now you are actually having continuous checks on your implementation and quality all the time.
Okay. I mean, there's this question. I don't know which hypothesis here is meant, but can you?
Yeah. Seeing requirements as hypothesis. That was my referring to.
Okay. Are there any vision about quality gates for the hypothesis?
Yeah, well, I would say like two things. One is review with the customer, of course, and then also your system integration test. Yeah, how your software or your part of the system works in a complete vehicle environment.
I think what's also important is the monitoring, right, of your product. So back in the old school days, you have a requirement, you implement, you verify, and then you put it out into the real world, and you validate that everything works out, and then you're done with it. But now what you're doing is that you continuously look at your product behavior and to see also how the customers are using them, and then you can actually validate throughout. I call this, not only system validation, but ecosystem validation, where you actually put the product out into the real use cases. And it's important, and unfortunately, it's not very widespread with the traditional OEMs yet to really have a proper monitoring system in your fleet.
Again, I think Tesla is the front runner here.
Yes, I know. I mean, there's, not to get that wrong, so there's two different ways you can do that. It doesn't mean you have the data crack and that pulls out every private data from your car and sends it to Tesla, but the car actually can start monitoring and learning, patterns and stuff like this, and reports behavioral patterns back, not urgently where exactly you parked overnight or something like that.
So far, no issues. Any other challenges that the people have?
I mean, I have one further question. I mean, why do some assessors, for example, interpret ASPICE in a way that they're on the safe side? They demand much more than needed, so to say. Or why this is? I mean, this is a lot of challenge, I think. I mean,
yes.
But
in my experience,
any thoughts?
Yeah. So the less experienced the assessor is, the most likely it is to downrate because they are scared, right? The safe side. So I do not know. I don't understand the product very well. I think they are not there yet. They are afraid to give a better rating, right? It's not like there are any consequences if you're giving a good rating for understanding the context of that particular organization. There are trainings, and I think they are working towards improving that as well. So to have assistants from NTACs participating in some assessments to qualify you as an assessor as well. We're not there yet. There are really good assessors, and there are a lot of them that are really, really not good. They come with biased and predefined questions, as in, do you have a checklist for that? And the ASPICE, it's not a checklist for anything.
Okay.
And
But
Fatih, we also need to keep in mind, not all of them are experienced software engineers, familiar with the latest and greatest in tooling, programming languages, and process automation.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So they basically they come with their picture of the world in 1995, and they want you to fall exactly into that framework. And if you don't, then I mean, we've heard bad stories from some of our clients where there's like, oh, we use a different approach for requirements engineering. For example, we do software only, so we use whatever markup language requirements engineering approach. And it's like, no, that's not okay. You have to use either Doors or Polarion or JAMA, or you fail.
That's not true. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. But we heard stories like that. So the openness. So we talk about tailoring, but the ones who actually really have to understand tailoring the most are the assessors, which unfortunately sometimes are very, very stuck in their frame.
Also, it's also very hard. So you have 1 week. You try to maybe technically understand. You're not a technical person as assessor. You have different components of the system that you're assessing, and you have a week and you're chatting with people. And if you're not experienced enough, you might have the syndrome that people try to cheat you. So you're overcompensating. So it's a lot of also soft skills involved, how to ask the questions, how to have the right conversations with the people, ask them how they typically do. So there are a lot of stuff that they also need to have, not just the ASPICE itself. Right, the model itself.
But can we not automate most of these things that these assessments are done more or less automatically? I mean, on CI/CD, if we have such kind of a platform, for example, where the software is built, tested, released, and so on, can we build such an environment where we get live data, and this live data can for example replace, not probably fully, but partially at least, these assessments that we have monitoring of certain processes, so to say. Is it possible?
Maybe, but you have to figure out the context. How do you tailor that to the context? It's not just the process context, it's the product context and the organization. Is it small? Is it medium? Is it software only? Is it hardware plus software? Is it system? Is it safety relevant? Do you have so many things that you would have to include in the way you even define the context to generate then the automation part?
But maybe I think there's merit, and we talked with a couple of startup founders as well. The way usually you go through an assessment is you do spot checks, right? Because no assessor is reading every requirement and every traceability link. But now from here on forward, if you have developed tools based on AI, you can actually do that, right? So you don't have to wait until some assessor comes in and does a spot check and then maybe finds that black sheep in your family by mistake. Or on the other hand, you prepare the white sheep and you just show them the nice part and hope that they don't look at the bad parts, right? No, but you can have actually some continuous feedback out of your development using AI tools. And that also takes the scariness out of the assessment, right? Because then the assessment would just be basically somebody reviewing all the outputs of that tool. And actually, Fatih, I'm with you on that one. I think short to midterm, we will see some tools coming up that actually do like ongoing ASPICE assessments, if you will. Of course, you will always need experts to feed the right context into it.
Yeah, definitely. But I think it's much easier for our organization if you have a continuous measurement of certain processes that you see every day, if you keep the processes or not, or in case to do this once a year, I think it's much more scary. You don't know what will happen, what will be the outcome. I mean, I think having some kind of a continuous measurement of the processes lower the problems, or I don't know, whatever.
But then
that's what you can do in your organization. A QM or QA organization can continuously check without an external SPICE assessment if the projects are following the processes. you would actually want to do it even if there's no SPICE requirement. But and of course, also in a project, you can do a friendly assessment. Yeah, many companies have in-house assessors that can do such check, as a friendly assessment. Also, if you want to prepare for a larger one, for example, if you're stepping up the ASPICE level from 1 to 2 or 2 to 3. Yeah.
Okay. There is one question. Can ASPICE 4 also be applied to organizations, software-defined vehicle processes? What do you think?
Yes. So as I said, you can use ASPICE in two ways: to assess or to define and design your processes. Take practices from ASPICE and incorporate them into your own processes at the organization level. You absolutely can, and you should.
I want to add that, SDV processes is it's a very lofty word. So, but what we learned, especially at Tesla, and I mentioned that in several episodes before, Tesla is very process driven. But the thing they don't do is to keep a process that doesn't work. So they're continuing to improve their process, and that might mean they change every week until it works. But once it's working, they follow the process until something new comes up, and then they modify the process. This is going towards more SDV approach, that you say like, okay, the right process is the one that works for us. And ASPICE is not prohibiting you from creating a process that works for you, right? And it's also not telling you, hey, you have to take a process from 1985 and you have to follow through and build SDVs with it.
Florian, that's a very good point, that maybe it's also part of this mix-up, because companies have fixed processes. The larger the organization it is, the more stable these and difficult to change those processes are. Yeah, and that may be the result of many people complaining, because it's actually the processes of the companies forcing the projects to work in an outdated or inefficient manner, and then with the hope that the process itself is satisfying SPICE.
It is unfortunately similar to what I talked earlier about the requirements. The processes are also very decoupled from the actual product development. So the processes are designed somewhere by somebody and then handed over into the product development. And those are the people who are rightfully so complaining that the process doesn't work well for them. And to blame ASPICE at that point, of course, is the wrong approach. But yes, so Fatih, go ahead.
Yeah, for me, how can you, for example, just one comment to Florian. In a large organization, the OEMs are really huge in Europe. They're not just 100, employee big companies. There are thousands of people, And if you have a dynamic change of processes, I think this could be quite difficult in such an environment. How you want to do that?
When I say dynamic, I don't mean uncontrolled, right? So they should be controlled by a group or somebody who is actually really hands-on there. What I meant earlier is that the processes, and I know that because I was responsible for writing some processes in Continental back in the day, because I had kind of nothing else to do as a junior there. So the person who writes the process is not the person who uses the process, and therefore there's a disconnect. And I don't say that you have to change it on a daily basis, but there should be a feedback, and there should be adjustment.
Okay.
To be honest, I think that's one of the reasons that actually Chinese or Tesla are much better. Than they are much more flexible in adapting the processes according to their needs, rather than to have a fixed set of rules that is applied throughout the whole organization across all products and product lines. Which there's some rationale from a global company point of view, have tens or hundred thousands of engineers. But this also makes it a little bit of inflexible.
Yeah, and also inefficient, right? So, and what I see on top of that, it drives the morale down quite a bit.
Yeah.
And we've learned that, and I mentioned that before at Tesla, for example. Once we tried to have everybody using the same process and tools for validation from component over subsystem, system, vehicle. And everybody was unhappy because it didn't work well for anybody. So we allowed them actually to write to come up with their own process and tools, and just to comply with the interfaces into the bigger picture. And then suddenly, not only the results were better and faster, but also the team's morale went up, because everybody was like, finally, I can use what works for me. And engineers, just by default, engineers want to solve a problem, right? That's why we all became engineers. and to handcuff ourselves with a process or a tool that drives me as an engineer nuts and eventually out of the door, maybe.
Right. So this goes back to instead of focusing on solving the technical challenges, now they all focus on the process itself. You already lost the teams and the value of the process.
Okay.
Right.
I mean, there is one comment here, a statement. I don't know if you would agree with that. I feel like for an SDV, the process tailoring before SDP must be dramatically different than it is after.
I have a very strong statement for SDVs. Forget the term SOP. Done. Software doesn't have SOP. Okay. Software is from here on forward. It's incrementally improving. Of course, vehicle platforms, you have SOPs and so on. Agreed. But from software point of view, there's no more SOPs.
But how are you going to handle warranties? Software warranties, all the OEMs, they have a clause on the warranties. So how does that work?
That's a super interesting question. I don't think we have opened that can of worm yet. But I mean, software doesn't age, so that's another thing, right? So you can't really say like software is good for 2 years and then not anymore.
But can be outdated though, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's a general problem the automotive industry has to figure out, how to avoid outdated software, right? We talked about UNECE R155 that requires 15 years of software updates for security. And we agreed in this forum before, you cannot update 15-year-old software. Imagine you go out now and update software from 2010. You go, and it's actually even older because it's 15 years after end of production. So you have to have a continuous updating of your software, so you're not running into outdated software, period.
I mean, how was it at that time when you worked for Tesla? I mean, SOPs, you had also SOPs there?
There's vehicle SOPs, yeah, and Alfred just puts in a ISO 26262 without no SOP. The software and the hardware has to be decoupled from here on forward when you talk about SDVs. And software is not starting to be developed and then getting released once, right? It's an ongoing process, and that's what we're talking all the time. Yes, of course, you have the safety critical parts, and they have a very different release process than the non-safety critical parts. But even though they have that, there's no SOP there from here on forward. It's just like rolling out software.
Yeah, also would like to add here. I mean, there's also this old style of software development there. You have maybe once a year or every quarter a formal, official, approved software release where you can also do the ISO 26262 stamp. That's past. Yeah. So we need to be able to build software daily. That's DevOps mode. And everything should be done automatic and supported, so that everything is then as compliant as possible to SPICE and everything. You may not officially approve every software release that you build every day according to ISO 26262. You want to do it with the ones that actually will make it into the car. But technically, from engineering, we should be setting it up in a way that every day a software release is there that can be theoretically used in such a vehicle.
And where are we there, Martin? I mean, where are we there at the moment with the European OEMs? I mean,
and it's a good one. I think many have seen it. Yeah, we see OEMs and suppliers building up DevOps modes. Yeah, software factories, CI/CD systems, but this only will work if it's done throughout the whole supply chain.
Yeah, and what we also see is that there's a little bit of chicken away from this situation, right? So there might be more technical capability than it is used as of now. And I personally believe that is because it hasn't really given a large cyber attack, for example, that those capabilities have to be used. So you can go out to any traditional OEM and ask them, how long do they need to roll out a software in their entire fleet? They will not even have an answer for that, right? Because I don't think that they actually have the tools tested yet. Maybe they have them, but they haven't used them yet.
I personally think they're not there at all. They're not there.
Okay.
I know there are some initiatives in the industry to see what's required to be able to build software maybe 10 years down the road. Yeah, think about the operating system, tools, etc. Most of them are cloud-based nowadays. So can you reproduce that? That will become a huge challenge going forward. Yeah, in the past, in the past, you just put your PC into the basement and then switch it on again, but it's not going to work anymore.
To throw a couple of anecdotes in here. So, I mean, I was a project manager for a Tesla original Roadster release in 2017-18. And it was really hard because those were 10-year-old cars. And we actually had to find old hard drives that run Windows XP in order to boot the compilers and all this kind of stuff. And then with that being said, I met once a gentleman from defense industry, and he says his test systems are still running Windows 3. So
wow,
exactly.
Okay.
So imagine you take somebody who just left the university and you put them in front of a Windows 3 system and ask them to do anything with it. It will be hilarious. So this is where actually I think containerization of software will come in handy and so on, because in 15 years we will not look into a Windows 7 or 8 or whatever version we are looking at right now. It will be something completely different.
I mean, I see this all these industry initiatives around SDV. For example, there are open source, like Eclipse or Covesa or all, you name it. How much these initiatives will contribute actually to the whole development? This is not clear to me actually. I don't know. I mean, how much can industry initiatives can contribute to the acceleration of SDV, in OEMs? It's not so clear to me. I mean, I don't know. Do you have any insight on this, Martin? I mean,
yeah, I actually do. I mean, there's just recently a new project has been started in Eclipse SDV. It's called SCORE, S-Core, aiming to build an open source version of a functional safety enabled middleware stack. Yeah.
Okay.
Some OEMs, suppliers are involved. The project is in an early stage and is very limited because they first want to validate their concepts of building the software, etc. are fine, and also the tools and the process they apply are fine from a safety certification point of view. Yeah. And then they gradually will scale up. Yeah, it's not like that everybody can throw some modules on the table and say, like, let's figure out how we can make this work. It's a very systematic approach. Let's see. Maybe that's a topic for a follow-up discussion where this project is evolving.
But so in general, how is the adaptation of such initiatives actually by the OEMs? Do you have any feeling for that? Is it highly, adapted, or is it, ignored?
Yeah, OEMs are actively supporting it, and some of the principles that we mentioned have been introduced right from the start. Yeah.
Okay.
Docs as a code, automatic documentation created through some tools, and have it consistent from specification to testing. Yeah, the whole process. So that looks promising.
Okay.
I mean, it's great to have everybody talking to each other, and this is what those initiatives really facilitate. You have people from different companies getting together and are actually legally and from their management allowed to talk to each other. That's a great start. So we don't have those compartments anymore. But on the other hand, it's also taking a lot of time, because the more people you bring together to try to find one solution for everyone, the more you need to allot time to that. So yeah. You got a question?
Yeah, there is one question. What are the ASPICE process groups which will be affected by the continuous cybersecurity activities process from an SDV perspective?
All. That's the short
I just want to say all.
So you have to think about ASPICE as a risk management, right? And then cybersecurity can introduce risks. So you might have to come up with some strategies on how you could handle, fix, mitigate, whatever, right? That means all of them are impacted. You need to think higher level, right? Don't take literally what is written there. What do I want to achieve? These practices and this process are supposed to help. If they're not helping, you go back and say, we need to change this. It's not helping.
But are there any adaptations actually of ASPICE in upcoming versions also regarding SDV, or is it just ignored?
So what is SDV? And what parts of ASPICE would be going against SDV?
Now, I think Fatih's question is more: is there something not against, but is there something that goes more
Supports.
for? Yeah,
Exactly, supports. I mean, supports SDV development or making it more efficient, or
I mean, we talked about iterative development, which is now in ASPICE 4.0. It's explicitly mentioned, right? So that's a good start to
But what
address.
else is missing to support SDV? What regulation or model do we still want or think that is needed to support SDV?
I mean, in SDV, this rapid software development, for example, is that you can release very fast and so on. I'm not really sure if this is. I mean, ASPICE and Agile is. These are two terms. And Martin was also talking about this at the beginning. I still have some issues with that, ASPICE and Agile, to bring them together somehow. I don't know. This is not so easy for me. ASPICE is, for me, this is my personal opinion. It sounds an old school, and Agile, very recent thing. And bringing this together, I don't know. I mean,
ASPICE is a model that tells you what, and Agile is a way of implementing that model into how. And I want to clarify this for everybody. Just because you're following Scrum or SAFe or whatever, it doesn't mean you're Agile. Agility is given by your capability to respond to change. If it takes you 1 year, no matter what's the model, you're not Agile, okay? So everybody needs to understand that Agile is a concept of responding fast.
Yeah.
So everything in your organization needs to be able to support that fast response.
Yeah, but it's interesting how often this is used as an excuse, right? I mean,
yes.
Said,
yes.
So I heard it a lot, especially in the German-speaking OEMs. It's like, we can't do Agile with ASPICE. Period.
Yeah, exactly. I hear this. So I mean, I've seen this in posts also. Yeah, I've heard this very often. I mean, this is, I don't know why there's some misconception there. I mean, that most worlds are not.
It's interesting, as Roxana said, agility is about taking the change, and this is what we see here exactly. It's not only a technical change; it's also a change in the way you're working. And
process change.
Some people use it as an excuse and say, I don't have to change because I have to follow ASPICE.
Yeah. And maybe for some, they're coming from this old V model or waterfall thinking that you first do the system requirements and then you gradually break it down. Yeah. That's something that people have to understand that this is not working anymore.
I actually ran into some of those people, and then I asked them about that Agile and ASPICE and so on. They were not even aware that there's an ASPICE version 4.0 or whatever. They thought there's only one standard, that the one they learned about in the 1990s or whatever, and that doesn't work with Agile. Yes, but the change is also happening in the ASPICE world. It's not only happening in the technical world.
So I want to reiterate one more time. ASPICE has a good set of engineering practices, best practices, system engineering, whatever you want to call it. It doesn't matter. Just look through those. It's about the what's. And then the way you do it, it's up to you. You can use whatever model. You can use iterative. You can use incremental. You can use both. You can use, it doesn't matter as long as you achieve the results. So you always look at this ASPICE and think, okay, how do I do that in the most effective and efficient way to get the results?
Yeah.
Do everything in your CI pipeline. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. I would point out two things which are different in SDV than looking into how ECUs or cars were being developed 20 years ago. One is we have this daily build, DevOps modes, iterative incremental development, so continuously build and test software, and not every quarter or so. Second, and the other is that the software function and the hardware development are decoupled. Yeah. In the past, ECUs were specified as a system. Actually, specification did leave it open whether a specific function was done in electronics, software, or hardware. And that part is now different. Yeah, if you are able to change and modify or add requirements through software at a later point in time.
Also, it's very helpful that, I mean, hardware evolves as well. So when we look at what hardware can do this day, it can be much more flexible, and therefore you don't have to be so specific. As I say, you use a microchip over an ASIC, you use an FPGA over an ASIC, you use a microchip over an FPGA, you use a GPU over a microchip. So we all up the game the hardware can do, so it can support more flexibility down the road. Granted, back in the day, that wasn't possible. You had very, very targeted hardware, software combinations, but from here on forward, you have much more capability in the hardware.
Here's an interesting question. I think, I mean, it targets the infrastructure actually in SDV with DevOps, and you need also some kind of a consistent infrastructure. At the moment, ASPICE is usually used by the ECU software development. I mean, the question is targets actually will ASPICE start to consider requirements for infrastructure to support SDV as a part of requirements for SDV development? I mean, I don't know.
So everything off vehicle, I would assume Alexander is
exactly
talking about that. Yeah.
Exactly.
So
I think at the moment this is not assessed, I think.
Not assessed, but doesn't mean you cannot consider. ASPICE says you need to identify your requirements. Use the stakeholder. Is the SDV infrastructure a stakeholder? Then you have infrastructure SDV stakeholder requirements.
Would it make sense, I mean, to do that, for example? Would it make sense, for example, to assess also infrastructure?
I can read the question also in a way that if the function in the vehicle depends on availability of the infrastructure. Think about voice processing in the cloud, etc. So
it can, yes. So we go back to that context.
Yeah. But I think in general, the automotive industry has to decouple their idea just to focus on the car, because we are providing mobility. Right? We're not providing a mechanical device that brings you from A to B. We're providing an integration into the ecosystem, into the environment. So at one point, we have to consider everything that contributes to this mobility as part of the accessible software, hardware, whatever it is. If it's now actively in the vehicle you're driving around with, or if it's in the cloud, from my point of view, it doesn't matter.
But cloud, I mean, backend services, for example, can also affect the security and safety in the car, right?
Yes, but that's why I'm saying you have to see it as a whole, right?
As the ecosystem. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. The ecosystem is very important, I think. Yeah, this is
of course that makes it much more complicated, especially because now suddenly automotive engineers have to think about servers, right? And it's, oh my God, I didn't sign up for that. I wanted to put wheels on a car. But it is what it is, right? So we are getting a more integrated product, and as such, we also have to check on the integration, not only on the core.
Also, I want to share that there are other SPICE models that are published. You can find them on the Intex website and the VDA. So it's data management SPICE. So if you want something more specific, IT service SPICE. So they have they have this concept of plugin. So you have the ASPICE, which is kind of the center of it. And then based on what your needs are, you can plug in other models to use for assessment.
There's your answer.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Perfect.
Cool. Only 2 minutes are left. I mean, any final words from you all? I mean, if you want to say something, some message you want to give, feel free.
I want to read what SPICE stands for to come back to the first question.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So we had some really interesting answers, mostly correct.
Well, some came with a wink, wink. So
yeah. So SPICE stands for Software Process Improvement and Capability Determination. It starts with a D, little d, and a capital E. And I have a little story from Alec Dorling. He said when they actually came up with the name, they were thinking about evaluation to use instead of determination. But in French and other languages, evaluation means assessment in English. So they had to brainstorm a word that has the same meaning. So they came up with determination with a little d and capital E.
See, this is a perfect example of a failed the real world validation, and they had to change after they launched.
Yeah.
Excellent.
I think this is a good end for our episode. Yeah. Thank you so much for joining. It was really good. It was really interesting. Thanks for the questions also. See you next time then. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. This was fun.
Thank you.
Bye.